You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas, on a beautiful, cold December day. Stormy Waters is back with us. I hesitate to call this a part two, referencing last week's what could be part one episode with Stormy, because let's put it this way, he's just the guest on this show 2 weeks in a row. These are very different discussions, and we talked for a couple of hours, and just about halfway, we went into a different direction. So that's why I've decided to cut this into two separate episodes. Again, if you have not listened to last week's, I highly recommend it if you are concerned about the coming financial collapse, largely and destructively over Europe, and then also here in the United States to a lesser extent, but still want to be taken seriously. We discuss how that's going to happen, why it's going to happen, and when it's going to happen on last week's episode. This week, we get into, for lack of a better term at the moment, we get into a lot more esoteric things in this discussion, where intuition comes from, where your knowledge and feelings and thoughts, all of that comes from. We get into some spirituality and things of this nature. I will say I forgot to mention up front last week, there is what some would consider bad words in this episode and last week's episode. If you've got sensitive ears or you've got young children around this while you're playing it, I would just like to give that warning to you up front. There's some language in this episode and last week's episode. I apologize if that offended anybody, or if your kids were around when you were listening to it and you had to say, oh goodness, hit stop and listen to it later. So let's get into it. Without further ado, our friend Stormy Waters is back with us on the show this week. Let's jump into it now. And Here we go with 2.0, ladies and gentlemen. But
welcome back.
Do you think that the Trump post-assassination attempt would handle things? Is it the same confidence you have when you say, well, the people in charge at least care about us, generally speaking, not one by one, I get that, but they're at least in the driver's seat when this shit hits the fan, as it were. Is post assassination attempt Trump better at handling what we're about to figure out, or would Trump have been good on that either way?
I think he would have been pretty good, but I think I don't think Donald Trump exists anymore, man. I think that assassin was successful. Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump died on that stage. Because he did. Anyone that knows anything knows that when something like that happens to you, it is as profound of a change to your life as if whether the bullet hit him, where between the eyes, or whether it grazed him. Because he's not just a guy that almost got shot but didn't. Mm-hmm. That's not what happened. If you think that that's all that happened, then you need to stop listening to me because you are too stupid.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
All right. If you think that that was the only thing, a man, right? So this is what I was saying about what human beings think about matters. And this is what I was saying about how a paradigm is like me saying, oh, well, let's see if I can bring it all the way back. But when I say orthodoxy is an ideology, Protestantism, Catholicism is a type of ideology. These are mental constructs. I think that doesn't equal reality in the physical world. is not accurate. I think
okay.
that what human beings believe in their hearts and focus their conscious intention to becomes reality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You are co-creating. And it's not just me. It's not my opinion. It's the Pentagon's opinion. It has been since 1957. Sorry, Neil deGrasse Tyson lied to you. Turns out you're not actually, in fact, a biological robot in a meaningless universe. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When 150 million people believe that you're a hero, that's what you are. Right? I don't know what your listener base is, but regardless, I hope they humor me into learning a little bit about Adolf Hitler. And what you should do is read an interview. I can't remember the journalist that was giving the interview or what publication. Just type in, if you just search for Carl Jung's interview about his time with Hitler, and listen to what or read what he describes, his experience. Right? He says quite clearly that Hitler wasn't a man at all. Wasn't a robot. He's like an automaton. Right? It's like there was something else piloting Hitler. The man. Like the man wasn't there. He wasn't doing man things, didn't have man facial expressions. Right? He said he was a man. He literally describes him as a man that was the vessel was possessed by the despair and the hope and the pain of 70 million German people. That collective anguish is enough conscious force to bring something from somewhere else into our world, to pull something else from somewhere else here. And that Hitler, the man, was a vehicle for that. He's another man that, anyways, doesn't matter. All right, but when 150 million people believe in their heart of hearts that this man is going to help them, is going to be their champion, you don't have a say in the matter anymore. If 150 million people believe that you are a hero, guess what? Sorry, if you have other plans, but you're a hero now, whether you want to be or not. And I don't think Donald Trump realized that until that moment.
Yeah.
He learned something very powerful. And if you notice, he's clearly a different person. Right? Now he says it. But for the very first time, Donald Trump got to live outside of Donald Trump. He got to see himself outside of himself. So that assassin was successful because whoever Donald Trump was, that person's dead now. That person doesn't exist anymore. When he got up from that stage, he was a different human being in his entirety. He may look the same, but he also looks different. Right? Like a man, when a man knows something or a man learns something profound enough, right? Like a young man can go to war, right? You could be 18, 17, whatever, looks like a child, right? And that man will come back from war 2 years later, 3 years later. He's what, 19, 20 now? Looks as much like a child as he left. but he doesn't look like a boy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, there should be nothing that has changed, right? He should look exactly the same. Right? If I look at a 17-year-old kid, or in World War II, a 16-year-old kid, and I come back and I check up on them and look at them at 19, they're going to look the same. But that's not what anybody said when they saw their son come home. That's a different person. He has had gnosis.
Mm-hmm.
He is both, and gnosis is a great word. It means both knowing and becoming. And that's what happened to Donald Trump. He learned something and he became something else. So I don't believe it is the same Donald Trump. I think anybody that thinks it could be is silly.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, with the amount of hope and pain that was behind Donald Trump, God wouldn't have had to move the path of that bullet if he didn't want to, because that much prayer would have moved it all by itself. Right? Like that much conscious intention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. It wouldn't have, it could have been God himself.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, we are made in his image, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that God is a bipedal hominid.
Right.
Right? That he doesn't have a mouth and eyes and ears.
Right.
So when he said he spoke the universe into existence.
Right.
I guess you could say that he willed it into existence.
Yes.
So how am I built like my creator? How am I the same? How am I in his image? If he doesn't look like I do, he doesn't talk like I do, in what way, what about me do I share with him? And that is the ability to create out of my reality out of sheer force of will. All right, this is the same reason why little 90, actually, wait a second. Buck, you're a firefighter.
Yes, sir.
All right. How does a 90-pound woman lift a car?
Well, it would
Her
take...
arms should literally be torn off.
Yeah, right. Yes, but we're all aware of these examples where someone in the moment does something that would be seemingly superhuman.
Seemingly, yeah. Like I'd say that's flatly superhuman.
Yeah.
A Chevy Suburban is big.
Yeah.
Right. Force of will is I think it's a little bit of a gift from Dad.
Yes.
And I think when that many people are focusing their intention on you, they need you. Well, it really doesn't matter whether he wants to be it or not. When that many people need you to be something.
You are.
Yes.
Let me get in.
That's what I think about Donald Trump.
Okay. Well, this also, the last topic we can get into, and this, you're very good at doing this and at leading, just where I was kind of going with this as far as gut instinct, which we can talk about. When we did the Patreon supporter Zoom, you mentioned that you feel...
I'm a good guesser, right?
Yeah, you are. What a coincidence. We discussed the time being right now more important to go on gut instinct maybe than the time of yesteryear, if you will. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on your call to your subscribers, again, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad that I'm flattered that your listeners think that, I'm somebody that they wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice hearing it. Still boggles my mind that anybody would value my thoughts in anything other than like an investment capacity.
Mm-hmm. If you guys find these discussions with Stormy Waters fascinating, intriguing, interesting, well, you're in for some good fortune here, because if you go visit miranchuknow.gumroad.com, you can find Tales of the Shadow Empire chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, starring our guest today, Stormy Waters, plus former guest and friend of the show, Tom Luongo. Jason Miranchuk of Miranchuk Now is doing a brilliant job at explaining the shadow economy, the shadow system, and whatnot, because there's a lot going on. He does a beautiful production of these interviews he's captured with Stormy Waters and Tom Luongo, and they're available for a very cheap price where they're all together. There's clips and background music, and it's done in a very dramatic, beautiful way. The production is top notch, and that is over at miranchuknow.gumroad.com. And go to, there's an area there where you can find Tales of the Shadow Empire. And I'd like you guys to go do it. Again, Stormy Waters is getting out there, but just even in the interviews I'm doing with him here, you're not going to get the full picture of the things that he and Jason discuss. Plus, there's a part 3 or 4, I can't remember which one it is, in there now with Tom Luongo. And boy, has Tom been getting a lot of things right. So, once again, go over to miranchuknow.gumroad.com and you'll find Tales of the Shadow Empire, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go purchase that and support our friend Jason. Thank you.
But I have like another side of my life that I keep very private, which, you know, having the blessing of anonymity allows me to, for brief periods of time, live as one person, right? I can talk as one person now. Like Stormy, the investor, the professional person, and Stormy, the mystic, gets to coexist, which is refreshing, which is why I like doing these. So on your call, your Zoom call, I said that, and this will probably be even more so, like, I'm sure that unfortunately we won't be able to see the results, but I would imagine it would be equally as profound to the people that are listening to this now. I said that I imagine, or I bet that a large number of people that were listening to the call, right, that the last 3 or 4 years, the men anyways, have felt like they were going through menopause. I asked them, like, I bet you that you've, been overcome by emotion in a way that you've never been before in your whole life. And it was sudden and profound in its difference, right? As in, like, something has clearly changed between the way you were to now. Something big, obviously, because you probably find yourself, whether you're talking, whether you're listening, whether you're reading, or whether you're interacting, you probably, I'm not going to say probably, because of at least what the result, every time I say that, I already know, right? That's why I say it, right? But you've basically been on the verge of sometimes, like, holding back tears, choking up, just being hit by waves of sudden emotion that come out of nowhere, even if they're not even relevant, right? You could be, reading something completely normal or explaining something completely normal and just get hit with a tremendous amount of emotion, right? That never used to be like that for you. But all of a sudden now you seem like you're raw and open, right? Just, you're exposed. And it takes very little to give you a very profound reaction when it comes to emotion. Right? To say that, you're just more emotional wouldn't really be to do it justice. But this is sudden, as in like, it could be like 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever. But it is a distinct difference between how you used to be. And you may have thought you were going crazy or like some hormonal thing or whatever. But I think that a large portion of you are experiencing this. And every single hand in the Zoom call went up, which I already knew. Because the people that find me are the people that are supposed to. So like when I meet somebody or I talk to somebody for the first time, that is the very first question that comes out of my mouth. Because the answer to that question is going to determine whether you are my friend or not, where you're on my team or not. Because if you read a lot of really old stuff, I guess I read a lot of mystic texts, some 2,000, some 4,000 years old, right? And they all roughly say about the same thing, regardless of where they come from, whether it be, Vedic texts, Greek or Egyptian, Hermetic texts, whichever. And they all roughly tell you the same story, not in its entirety, but the way to look at it would be like these men of all these different places, from all these different places, and all these, like, literally separated by oceans of time and thousands of miles. They'll never come in contact with each other, nor will anything they've ever written come in contact with any of the other people. So they've all stumbled on this feeling themselves. And what they all say is that, like, at the end of, you've probably heard the term like the Kali Yuga thrown around a lot. It is true, but nobody gets particularly granular because no one really knows particularly too much about it, especially the people that are talking about it. But at the latter half of the age, the end, the crescendo, you can go to my Twitter. And there's a conversation. You just go into my replies and see it. It's probably the place you'll see it the quickest. Is a conversation with an account. It's a very good friend. He's a Eastern mystic. He's a Vedic mystic. His name is Mudra, Mudra. And what we are talking about is exactly what I'm talking about now. So in this age, a small percentage of men will have the veil peeled back. And there's no, I guess it's easier to type this than to say it out loud because you sound more crazier out loud. I don't think anybody is really confused that evil is now out in the open. Right. Like, the stakes are quite high. Right. the reason at this part of the age, our ancient enemy, our nemesis, right? Satan, Lucifer, Lucifer's a different cat, but whatever. He's in the same place. But our nemesis is evil itself. It is both a force and a consciousness. And at this point in the cycle, he commands his men, or his armies, to take the field. And God cannot command his armies to do anything. Because in the infinite wisdom and love, he gave us free will. So we have to choose to pick up our sword and fight. He can't make us. So a subset of men that he wants to fight will have, the Holy Spirit will peel the veil back from their eyes. They will know things. And where do you know things from? How do you know things? Well, thoughts and knowledge are different things. They come from different places entirely. Thoughts live in your head. Knowledge comes from somewhere else. All right? And you have to know a thing first to think about it. Right? If I ask, an Amazonian tribesman what his opinion is on a Ford F-150, he's going to look at me and go, what the fuck is a Ford F-150? Right? He can't think of a thing that he does not know first. And how is knowledge conveyed? I think the best analogy that I gave on that call was in regards to women, right? Women have a bit of what we're experiencing as men now.
Yes.
Those that are listening to me, they have this innately, right?
Yes.
You could plan a surprise party for you. In fact, there's about 20 different studies that are peer reviewed and have been published. I can point people to if they're interested, right? But that have studied, women's intuition, I guess you could call it, right? And you could plan for her a surprise party. You could spend months on it. You can invite all of her friends, make sure all of her friends are there, and presents and balloons and all the fucking stuff, everything. And let's say you rent a big venue and, right, you take her to the venue, and as soon as she opens the door and there's a surprise and the balloons and all this stuff, right, you look over at her and she should be happy. She should be ecstatic, but she doesn't look ecstatic. Right? Let's say there's a guy in the back of the building that wants to hurt her. She doesn't know that man exists. She has absolutely no way of knowing that man exists. But as soon as she crosses that threshold, she knows. And you look at her and you'll say, what is wrong? Because at this point, you're annoyed. Right? You put in 2 months into this. And she will tell you, I don't know. I just have a bad feeling. And you'll say, what do you mean you have a bad feeling? Bitch, I put 2 months of work into this. And she will tell you that she can't put it into words. She just has a bad feeling.
Yes.
And you could take an EEG and we can strap an EEG, which is a brainwave thingamajigger. It's like an EKG, right? We're going to need both of these. We're going to put an EKG on Buck. We're going to put an EEG on Buck, right? We're going to measure his brainwaves and we're going to measure his heart. And we're going to take Buck to the museum. And in the back of the museum, right, there's going to be a big painting. It's going to be covered with a big curtain. Right? We're going to sit him down in front of the painting. I'm going to say, are you ready? And we're going to say, yes. And we're going to drop the curtain. And by the time that curtain hits the floor, Buck already knows it's beautiful. And literally in less than a second, right? In about, 0.3 to 0.6 seconds. Buck's brain is giving me the same EEG and the same EKG if we had just shown him a big, giant picture of his mom. But that's impossible because it takes about 1.2 seconds for the light to bounce off that painting into his eyeballs, for those eyeballs to then flip the image, his brain to then merge those two images into a singular image and then process that image. And then once processed, to start eliciting the chemical and electrical responses to then give me that EKG and EEG reading. That process takes about 1.5 seconds. So how the fuck does he know that it's beautiful when he couldn't have even processed the image yet? Because knowledge comes in the form of feeling. And I'm sure your father Turbo will probably coincidentally, even though he and I have never spoken nor have I heard anything he's ever said, will probably say the exact same thing.
Once a month, my supporters of this show and myself and a special guest have a Zoom meeting. It's not recorded, it's not posted, it's just private. It's between you guys, the guest, and myself. I do this because it means a lot for you guys who support me by showing me that this show means a lot to you. I love talking with you. I look at it as like a benefit for people that support the show, but it's really a benefit for me. I get to know you guys and have an off-the-record discussion with our guest. And, sometimes topics you don't want to necessarily have all the ins and outs discussed online, if you know what I mean. So to be in this group, please go to patreon.com/counterflow and donate $5 or more per month. And it gets you in this club. We do it once a month. It's a great time. It's great people. They're all smarter than me. So that's an upgrade from what you're used to. I can tell you that. The guests are always guests that people want to hear from. A lot of you guys will be familiar with many of the guests. Father Turbo's done it. Father Deacon Ananias has done it. David Patrick Harry's done it. My own priest, Father Ignatius, has done it. Father Moses McPherson's done it. It's a very good time, and I think you guys would enjoy it. If you love this content, please go to patreon.com/counterflow, $5 or more per month. Thank you.
Right. When you know something, when God wants you to know something, like real actual knowledge, that information is conveyed to you in the form of feeling. Right? Like, how do you know? Like, if I ask you, any of the listeners, like, if I ask you, do you love your wife? You're going to immediately say yes. I'm like, but did you think about it? No, you didn't. Right? How do you know that I'm staring at you?
Right. Yes.
How could you possibly know?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. I told you about that. So here's another funny experiment. It's a peer review. It's been peer reviewed and it's also been replicated, I think, 4 or 5 times now. But let's just say that this is the first time. So we're going to take Buck again, take him out of the museum, and we're going to put him in the center of a football field. In the center of the football field, at a 50-yard line, there's going to be a chair. And that chair is facing the opposite direction from me. I'm standing behind him, I'm sitting him in the chair. I've got my handy EKG machine and my handy EEG machine. Put those on Buck. And then I'm going to hop in a golf cart with, I don't know, some guy Anybody, doesn't matter, right? A second participant. And we're going to go and we're going to drive roughly 8 or 9 miles, right? So over the horizon, we're going to get into the top of like a tower, right? Let's say it's like 4 stories tall, whatever. At the top of this tower, I have a telescope with a big giant shutter on it. I'm going to tell the second participant to look in that telescope. And they're going to look in the telescope and be like, I don't see anything. And I'm like, no shit, asshole. The shutter hasn't opened yet. Keep looking. He's going to keep looking. And then for an instant, that shutter is going to open and it's going to close. And at the exact same time, Buck's EEG and his EKG go nuts.
Mm-hmm.
When I say the exact same time, I mean instantaneously. Right? Like 0.2 seconds, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. Funny thing is, though, is that's faster than sound, faster than light. So for that to be true, which it was and is every time it's replicated, that poses a lot of problems for our worldview.
Mm-hmm.
At least our materialist paradigm that we are forced to live in.
Yes.
Because for that to happen, so not only does Buck not know that other person, that telescope and that tower, not only does he not know that any of that shit exists, how could he possibly know that he was being stared at? How could you possibly receive that information?
Mm-hmm.
And how was that information conveyed to you? That's knowledge. Someone is staring at you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that someone is staring at you? If you can't see them, right? Like, let's say I am behind you right now and I'm staring at you. You're going to fucking know it.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to know it? You're going to feel it. And not only are you going to feel it, but you're probably going to be able to spin around and look right at me. Like you already knew where I was.
Mm-hmm.
No. Hunters, anybody that hunts,
Yes.
already knows what I'm talking about. Because the game that they're hunting, they could be hidden or so far away that animal, deer, elk, whatever, there's no way that thing can see them. But the second that as the hunter is stalking him, he will make sure not to look at him. Or, because the second he does, the elk knows.
Yeah.
And the elk splits. So not only does the elk know you're there, it also knows your intention. So let's pull at that thread a little bit. What does that mean? Well, it means that knowledge clearly is conveyed in the form of feeling. Buck didn't think, well, shit, I think that someone is staring at me. No, he didn't have any of those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
He just immediately felt it and then had thoughts. Thoughts after feelings. Thoughts after knowledge. Right? The information, the true stuff, the thing that is real, the actual quantitative information, that was conveyed to him via feeling. And it was conveyed to him instantly. Just like that girl that he took to that surprise party he planned for 2 months. She knew instantly. How did she know it? Well, she can't describe it to you. Why can't you describe it to me? Because I just have a feeling. Feelings are not, unfortunately, we don't have any control over them. They come whenever they come. and they come from somewhere else. Because if we did have control over our feelings, nobody would cry ever.
It'd be worse, to be honest. There's the old materialist atheist libertarian to me is like, well, that'd be great. It's like, no, that's much worse. And
crying
it also
sucks.
But
nobody wants to do it.
You said something, now I can't remember if it was offline or online, about how women cry quite easily, and that's one of the things that makes them beautiful. I agree more. And then how we don't have to relate this to us or anything, but just broadly speaking, when a man and a woman meet, and you were talking about offline, the people that last the longest, they kind of, because their gut instinct, their feeling, if you will, and orthodoxy, sometimes we call it the noose, or some people call it the third eye, whatever the case is.
Yeah. Oh my God, all these different cultures that did not come in contact with each other are all seemingly describing the exact same thing.
That when you know something, and you don't have to logically rationalize through it for years and years and years and then go, okay, I've come to a scientific conclusion, right? Like, I think 100%. My feelings are legitimate, right?
Yes, 100%. Because, okay, it seems that when we rationalize and we think our way through it, we're wrong. Right? We didn't know what we thought we knew, right? Or what the thoughts turned out to not be true. Right? They weren't actual knowledge. It turns out they're just thoughts.
Yes. And real quick to throw this one in for those maybe just if they're lost at all on promotion tests in the fire department, we often say when you get to the question and you're like, the very first answer that goes, yep, that one. Do not change that. Always go with the initial, yep, it's that answer, because you think your way out of being correct. Go ahead. Sorry, Stormy.
100%. And it's 100% true. When there used to be a lot of our common parlance, a lot of the words we use, we don't know where they came from. A lot of the sayings we use, right? A lot of them are, we'll call it like, they're mystical sayings, they're mystic sayings, they're occult sayings, but we don't actually know that anymore. That message has been lost. When people say, that rings true to me, they don't actually know where that came from. It comes from a Hermetic axiom, right? The soul knows the sound of truth. It knows the sound of truth by its ring. As in, your soul, not your brain, knows true information the second it hears it. The second it sees it. It knows instantaneously. It doesn't have to hear anything else. All right, like you could explain something to me, and within the first 5 seconds of it, like, this feels true to me. Like, I know. And with women, like the Western mystic tradition says that women, like, are saying about women is that they're of the waters. Like, women live half in our world, half in the next. They're not all the way here, right? So that river of knowledge and thoughts and events and pasts and present, like that, they've got like 1 foot in that, right? They're more in tune to that. This is why, like, I find that so many of the words that we use are actually words specifically used to camouflage spiritually significant information.
Yes,
because the term women's intuition, or actually just women's intuition in general, is scientifically provable. Turns out it's real. It's a real thing. So why would we call it intuition, right? Like, oh, we've got it all figured out. It's basically what you're telling me. Like, there's, oh, we know what this is. This is just women's intuition, or like placebo effects, right?
Yes, right.
Every doctor will tell you, oh, well, we know what this is. It's just a placebo effect. Well, no, placebo just is Greek for unknown phenomena or phenomenon. So basically what you're telling me is that this is the phenomenon effect. Okay. Well, it sounds like you don't know what this is at all. And all this word is doing is just giving you an excuse to not figure out what it is.
Yes.
All right. Like, you don't want to have that, you don't want to explore that. So what you're telling me is, wait a second, hold on. So you told me that I was getting a medicine and you were giving me sugar pills. And my brain, because I was thinking that I was getting medicine to cure my cancer, you're telling me that thought, me thinking I was getting real medicine instead of fake medicine, that cured me of my disease. And you're going to dismiss that away. We're like, oh yeah, that's just the placebo effect. No. Back up. My brain, not my brain, because that's not where your consciousness lives. But anyways, me thinking that I was being healed me. That's what placebo effect is in reality. And you would think that every single fucking dollar of medical research would be to figure out why that is. But it's not. It's not the world we live in. Our world is governed by evil spirits. So women's intuition is no different, right? It's a scientifically provable thing. You can put headphones on a woman or a man, but women are much, much better at it. As in, like, no matter how much I practice and I dedicate to sharpening this knife, which, trust me, is a lot and it's very sharp. When it comes to perception, a woman that has spent zero time practicing and trying to hone that ability will be better than me, always and forever, because that's one of the reasons why they're special. Women are special for lots of reasons, as are men, but our strengths are different, even when it comes to this type of stuff, even when it comes to our innate abilities, right? So women will know things, like you can put a headphones on a chick and you can say, all right, sometime in the next 10 minutes, this is going to blast very loudly a very, very unpleasant and scary sound. And it's going to startle you. And you'll be surprised because even you don't know when the sound is going to come because it's random. Right? We have all different types of machines that are really good at making things happen at random intervals. So you put the headphones on her head, the EEG and the EKG, you hook her up to the randomness scream machine, and surprise, her EKG and her EEG start going nuts 30 seconds, a minute before that scary noise that she has absolutely no way of knowing, nor do you, the person giving the test, was going to happen. So her body and her mind are preparing her for the terrifying start that she is about to have in 30 seconds.
This is so interesting.
She just saw 30 seconds to a minute in the future. Well, I'm sorry. That's impossible. In fact, like, the physics says that it's as impossible to know what's going to happen 30 seconds in the future or a minute in the future as it is to know 30 months in the future or 10 years in the future. There is no difference. If you can see the future and it's a day ahead, a week ahead, it makes no difference whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year. It doesn't matter.
Or 20
That
seconds.
hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Yeah. And the Department of Defense actually tried to operationalize this as a technology, and it was extremely successful, except for bureaucrats. The people that allocate budgets and resources are generally of a certain spiritual type or lack thereof.
Okay.
They're all leftists.
Yeah.
Anything that smacks of woo or consciousness of any type, anything that violates the ideology that man is entirely interchangeable and is a biological robot, and the only things that exist are what we can see, touch, and feel with our own eyes. Anything that violates that seems to magically not get funding the second it starts to gather any attention whatsoever. So we put similar type machines, EKG, EEG machines, on soldiers in their helmets. And this is in Iraq war underway for like 2 years now, right? So IEDs are becoming a huge fucking problem. I don't know if a lot of you remember, but during the Iraq war, the second one, after like we pretty much toppled Saddam Hussein, right, after Fallujah and all that shit, then came the IEDs. And the US military and any other military on the planet was completely unprepared for IEDs. They had never existed before. All right. An enemy embedded in a civilian population that would remotely detonate explosive devices, right? And not actually seek to win on the battlefield, but just to maim and kill as many soldiers and inflict as much psychological damage as possible had never been seen before. So we weren't exactly prepared for it. We were trying to figure out IEDs. So when a bunch of scientists figured out exactly what I just said about, Foids and their magic fortune-telling abilities, and men had it to some extent, they would basically put an EKG and EEG machine, which you can do a pretty good job of, underneath somebody's plate carrier and enough of the connections inside somebody's helmet for the EEG. And they would hook it up to this little red light. There's a red light in front of everyone's helmet. And then there's big red lights in front of the steering wheel of the Humvee. And 4 guys in the Humvee.
I see where this is going.
Whenever 3 of them got the feels, right? Whether it be 30 seconds or a minute, whatever. If you got 3 out of 4, all the lights would go off and the driver would stop the Humvee. And they tested this in, what's that training area in the desert where they blow stuff up? Anyways, they tested it there.
In New Mexico, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I can't think about this.
New Mexico.
Yeah. My people are typing away right now really quickly, but yeah, we're both. Yes, I know what you're talking about though.
Something Sands Proving Ground, whatever. There we go. That's as close as my brain's gonna get to it. Hold on, I got it. Oh, I thought I had to sneeze. My bad. Sorry, listeners.
No worries.
So we also put it in the field in Iraq with an equally high percentile success rate. All right. So if you're telling me you could eliminate 90% of the IED casualties, you better have a damn good reason why that program was basically had all its funding taken away. And you'll never get an answer for that. Ever. Because the tech exists. It went into the field, was operationalized. And it operated on a principle that nobody understood. You don't have to understand how things work down here. God makes the rules. We just work here.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
All right. So women are kind of special in the sense that because information is conveyed to us in feeling. And I'm sure all the women that listen to this right now, I bet you all of the decisions that you made that you really regret were decisions that you made when you basically disregarded your gut instinct that you knew already. And you just convinced yourself to go ahead with it anyways. I guarantee every single woman listening to this is nodding her head right now. The same way that every single man that's listening to this got really fucking uncomfortable really quick when I basically asked them, hey, feel like you're going through menopause, bud?
Right.
Last couple of years, are you unexplainably emotional? Do you get overcome with waves of emotion out of nowhere for seemingly irrelevant things at least once or twice a day? Well, if knowledge is conveyed in the form of feeling, then what is actually happening to you? What did you think the veil being pulled back would be like? Vibes? A party? Like, what did you think this was going to be like? Because this is exactly what it's supposed to be like, because now is time for you to choose. That's really what matters. This is why every single person I meet in our thing, the very first thing I want to know is if they've been going through menopause or not. Because I need to know who is going to fight and who's not. Who's on my team and who's not. Everybody thinks like demonic possession works like it does in the fucking Poltergeist.
Right.
Or like The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Buck asked me before we started recording about how I would answer, the question that many people of faith, and I'm sure priests get incessantly, well, how come bad things happen to good people? How come this person dies? Or this person, they were like the best person ever. They didn't do anything. Why did God kill them? And that's because we can't help but look at things through our paradigm. Man suffers time, not God. God lives outside of time and space. You know he does because he created both. So obviously he was doing just fine without them. Right? His logic, his logos, is our geometry. We literally live in the rules that he set about through force of will. Right? So he lives outside of time and space. So do they. So if I live outside of time and space, that means there is no distance to me. Right? It is as easy for me to be here as it is to be there. If I live outside of time, it's as easy for me to be here right now or there right now at the same time. Time and distance mean nothing. Time and distance only matter to you because you are burdened by time and therefore you are burdened by the dimensions of our reality that we are forced to endure. They're not. So it is as easy for a demon to possess one person as it is to possess 1,000, 100,000, 1,000,000. At the same time, it's not a one-to-one relationship.
Right.
Sorry, you guys aren't going exclusive. Turns out he's seeing other people.
Right.
And I don't know, there's kind of like two types of people. Like the normies see what we see, man. They're not dumb. They're just scared. Because if you see evil, and if you really see evil, then just like Trump. I don't need to tie this to Trump, but
yeah,
I said earlier how like if once a man knows something profound, the old version of him is dead. He is now something different. He has learned something that has changed him forever. Like the kid that went to war. He comes back a different person. The kid that went to war doesn't get to come home. He's dead. So when we're confronted with evil, like real evil, like in all of its horror and no, what's the word I'm looking for? Its presence, I guess, right? Because now it seems to not really give a fuck about, whether it's seen or not. It's out in the open now. So like when a human being sees evil in the raw spiritual sense, sees a person possessed, I would imagine that a lot of your listeners get sleep paralysis that they've never told anybody before.
I have heard that from many of them.
I'm a really good guesser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I bet they didn't used to have it. Maybe they had it when they were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
For all of you that are listening, you probably had it as a kid and then it kind of stopped, went away when you hit puberty and whatever. And now it's back. Surprise. What changed? Anyways, when you see evil, you're forced to choose, right? Because if evil exists, its opposite exists.
Yes.
And if its opposite exists, then you have a burden now. Right? Like you know that the man upstairs is real and he's upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you have a duty now. You have an obligation now. And that's scary because the obligation is not a good one, not one anybody would willingly want. Right? Because if God exists and evil exists, then you are expected to fight evil every single day.
Yep.
Until the day you die.
Yep.
And you'll never win.
Right.
Right? You will fight something forever and then you'll die and you'll lose. And that's what's expected from you. That's actually the bare minimum. And that's a very scary thing. So what they do is they just pretend that they don't see it, thinking that if they pretend they don't see it, they don't have to choose. And some of them don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I believe that what is it? You know where the NPC meme came from?
Well, video games, but if it's beyond that, then no.
All right, I didn't know this. And there's a great account that everyone should follow. A guy by the name of Space Age Maximus. He's a great guy.
Yes. Yep.
Him and I did a long series on consciousness. It was like 3 episodes, like total like 6 hours. It took like 2 months to do. But I like talking about that. And he was the one that told me. I had no fucking idea. So basically, I told him that a lot of ancient texts, whether they be like Egyptian texts or Greek texts, or after Alexander, kind of the mystic tradition of the ancient Greeks and the mystic religion of the Egyptians kind of came together. They're both like, hey, wait, you know that thing that that you know? And I don't really call it religion, but because like in the ancient world, there was no such thing as science separate from spirituality. They were the same. Because if it happens here, then it happens because God allows it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If he sets the rules, then anything that exists here on this plane exists because he wants it to. So there would be no element of physical phenomena that is not at some base level of a spiritual significance. So the ancients never differentiated like, oh, this is science over here and this is spirituality over here, and they're different. It was all one and the same thing. So when this is what people kind of confused about magic, where they think magic is just a silly Harry Potter thing. And really, it's not. To the ancients, it was spiritual science, right? It is a scientific approach to spiritual phenomena. But the point I was getting at is whether you look at their texts, which are the Egyptian texts, which are arguably like 6,000 years old, or the Chinese texts, which are 4,000 years old, or the Vedic texts that are, I think, 6,000 years old, or the Greek texts, which are at least 3,000 years old. They all say the same thing. They say that 3 in 10 people are conscious. 3 in 10 have souls. And when I told this to Space, he kind of freaked out. He's like, holy shit. He's like, do you know where the NPC meme came from? And I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, it came from a meta-analysis. And to those listening, a meta-analysis is like the gold standard of science. Right? It's because if I do a study, right, and I say this will happen if this other, like in this condition, this will happen. Right? But that test will only be in that condition. What if I move that condition? What if I jiggle that condition around it a little bit? Right? What if I do it in the rain? Or what if I do it in high humidity? Or what if my friend does it? Right? Like, so basically a meta-analysis is thousands, like literally hundreds and thousands of variations of roughly the same experiment. So you're attacking something from every possible angle. And then you're taking all those results and you're putting them all together until you get a complete picture. I don't want to say it's impossible. Like, I'm sure somewhere, a meta-analysis has been falsifiable, but not one that I've heard. They're extremely thorough. And apparently, a meta-analysis was done on whether human beings have the ability to conceptualize themselves outside of themselves, right? So I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like for you to analyze 2 hypothetical scenarios, right? Do I choose path A or path B? What you're doing is you're projecting an avatar of yourself. You are projecting yourself into a future where you travel down path A. And then you think about like, oh, okay, well, all right. And then you project yourself into the future traveling down path B. And then you weigh those 2 together. But what is fundamentally imperative is the ability to project yourself into the future, to see yourself outside of your physical existence in the immediate. Right? Like, and this extends to being able to, we're talking like future planning.
Right.
Empathy.
Yes.
Empathy is imagining yourself outside of yourself.
Low
right?
time
Looking
preference.
at yourself from somebody else's eyes, right?
Yes. Low time preference behavior.
Bingo. I forgot libertarians.
Yeah, sorry. I'm
yes.
drawing from the past, but yes.
Yes, exactly. Well, high time preference behavior is consciousness. So what I told, and he said, he goes, this meta-analysis found out that only 30% of the population is able to do that. Only 30% of the population possess an inner monologue.
Really?
Is able
that
to
low?
dialogue with themselves. Yes. I had no fucking idea. My jaw hit the floor. Even though there's been lots of these things where I will find, because at first, again, I came I came from the church to atheism and back.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I left was because I got really into science. I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I can't, these two things, they're incoherent. And only when I got to like the bleeding edge of science did I find out like, oh, this is back where I started.
Yes.
I basically went in a big circle. And Einstein did the same thing. I was a young guy with some money. I bought some of Einstein's private or personal letters, and Google Translate just came out. Hold my phone over the letter and the camera, and it would display in English what it meant. And like my jaw hit the floor. Like, oh, I got like the fucking science guy. And I'm looking, and all he's talking about is God. He says he sees God everywhere. From the smallest of the small to the biggest of the big, God's signature is everywhere. He says he can't get away from it. And he's describing this, right, to Schrodinger. Right? Almost every single person that was there in the beginning of quantum mechanics was deeply religious and more affirmed in their faith by their discoveries. Only my textbook told me that those two things are incoherent.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, one of the ways that we test for consciousness, because human beings are really excited about aliens and AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you can imagine, being the idiots that we are, we've designed tests to test whether something is conscious or not in the event that we come in contact with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have tests to determine whether a AI has become conscious or whether an alien life form is conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I believe everything is conscious. It has to exist on this plane. But let's just say you didn't. We determined that the easiest, one of the tests that we use to determine whether something is conscious is the ability to recognize other consciousness. Right. And the ability to think and conceptualize oneself outside of oneself. So, depending on how kind you want to be,
I'm making a bunch of connections.
That test and say, holy shit.
Right.
7 out of 10 people aren't conscious.
Yeah.
And that fits roughly with my experience of how many people. So we divide that in half, right? So that means 15%. Because basically men are getting a higher dose even, form of what women get, right? So basically, about 20% of the people I talk to on a daily basis will experience what I was talking about the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But yet when I come to Art's thing,
it's most of them.
Yeah, it's almost everyone.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Isn't that weird? You can try it in your everyday life.
Yeah. Now I know. Now I'm, again, every time I talk to you or listen to you, my mind goes off into other questions and directions, but okay.
That's my whole life, man. I don't control the remote.
Yeah, fair enough. Oddly enough, too, something to hark back to what we discussed real briefly. Well, not real briefly, but earlier, I cannot tell you, and it probably took over 100 times for me to go, oh, wait a second. How many times I've been at work in the fire station and awaken and gone, why am I awake? And 30 seconds into it, boom, tone goes off. And
really?
That has happened well over 100 times. And finally, one night after it happened, on the way to a call, I thought, that is interesting that I keep waking up 30 seconds before a call comes in. It's like my body knows it's going to happen. I don't know.
How could it? How could it know, though?
Right. Well, that's kind of what we were talking about. But I couldn't stop thinking as you were discussing that stuff, especially with the IEDs and this instinct that made the lights flash. But I've had that so many times.
We're a lot more perceptive than we give ourselves credit for because we're so distracted all the time and all these little things. We don't realize exactly what's going on. And I believe this is why mystics, or sorry, not mystics, this is why ancient people or people from the past, when we read like the church fathers, right? It always seems like the spirit world was so much more present for them.
Right. Yes. Yep. Because there's less static or something.
Yes. Yes, there was. And I mean, because really, like, you could just go into your day-to-day life and you could point out, like what you just pointed out. Like, that's a profound thing that you just said, right? Not only do you know something before it's going to happen that you have absolutely no way of knowing, but you know it so deeply that it wakes you up from a dead sleep.
Right.
Like, how? How is that possible? And I'm assuming you're not the only one. Or actually, maybe you are. You may be the person.
Right. I've never asked anyone else, and I've never brought that up at work.
You would think that would be, you're going to find that most people are not like you. That was a scary thing for me. That there is a precious few. And I think like during COVID, remember, it was only like 30% of people didn't buy the bullshit.
Right.
I remember Biden saying that, like number 30%.
Oh, isn't that something? Okay.
Yeah, like I don't.
The remnant.
Yeah, I don't. You have to. I don't know. I guess what I'd say is that most of the people that I encounter online, right, the ortho bros and the tradcath guys, right, when I see them like spurring it, like they think that, it's a good way, a tactful way of putting this. They think that like rattling off all of the facts and know what this church father says on this day and this bull or this papal bull and this and this and this. Right? And when I hear that, I think it makes me very sad. And it's like, you would think that shouldn't happen. Right? Sorry about that. I'm a very rude podcast guest. I didn't turn my phone on silent.
I didn't even hear it. That's how good your mic is.
Good mic. So when I see that, I feel bad because I think I know, like, they're trying to convince themselves that they believe. They know that they should believe. But if you don't know what belief feels like, you would think that belief would be like, I know all the things. The more I know, that must make me a more of a believer guy, the more time I've dedicated to this. But it doesn't. I can't help but think that they are doing this. I guess the autistic degree in which they try and like memorize all these facts. That they're trying to convince themselves that they believe because they don't. And it scares them. And this is the thing that so many people are like, oh, well, I catch that Sargon guy and a bunch of other guys saying like, oh, we need a re-enchantment. Well, you don't even know how the first fucking enchantment happened. You don't, how the fuck are you going to re-enchant anything? Right.
This is where I discovered I discovered my failure, as did Pete, as did several of us with libertarianism. once 2020 hit, we have been going around for years and years and years, for me, a couple of decades, explaining that if people just understood liberty, they'd want it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Liberty is evil. I know it sounds crazy, but what is absolute freedom?
Mm-hmm.
Only a divine type of intelligence. When I say divine, I don't mean it's in God. I mean supernatural. Only a supernatural intelligence would know that absolute freedom would be far more of a hell, of a curse, than absolute duty and servitude.
Yes. Yeah.
Because what is freedom? That's another way of saying that you are free to do whatever you want whenever you want.
Or you're a slave to your passions at that point.
Bingo. Do you get more fulfillment from doing whatever you want, or from doing something for others that you wouldn't generally want to do?
Right.
When does a man feel more fulfilled? When he is free to do whatever he wants, he can lay on the couch,
Yep.
he can do whatever he wants, or when he has to do something hard.
Yeah. Which fire crew
for
feels
people he
more?
love.
Which fire crew feels more awesome and together and happy after a shift? The one that sat on the couch and watched TV the entire
They could
shift,
do whatever they want.
or the ones that went to a house fire that was really hot, a wall collapsed, it was dangerous, and they pulled out a baby.
Yeah. Even if you pulled out nothing.
Even if that's correct, even if it just was hard work and that was it. We all would prefer, we love that much better than sitting on doing whatever we want with video games or whatever.
Yep. Because it's purpose. Right? You know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Right? Like all of our reward mechanisms as men. Like if I had to walk 5 miles and then carry a whole bunch of food and stuff back 5 miles, I would be pissed. But let's say my car broke down and my family needed to be fed.
Right.
That guy that's walking back, you may think he's upset or he's uncomfortable, he's angry, and that guy is the happiest he's ever been. That guy's going to walk in the door exhausted, wanting to die, and he'll be the happiest he's ever been. Because it turns out we don't actually know what we need. Somebody else does. Somebody else has always known.
Mm-hmm.
This is like with the intuition thing.
Right.
Every time you have a fucking plan and you try and make that plan happen, not only does it blow up in your face, but it probably ends up doing the exact opposite of what you wanted. But every time you just go with the situations as they are presented to you and just go with your gut, things end up working out better than you ever could have possibly hoped. And if you think about like all the different little synchronicities and all the little chance coincidences that it took to get that person, that opportunity, whatever, to land in front of you, for you to make that choice, that means it wasn't your choice. It means it wasn't your plan. Like somebody put that in front of you. All of the best thing all the things that have ever happened to me that have really been game changers happened from random acts of kindness, right? Like whenever there is a situation where I can do something that means next to nothing to me, but will mean the world to somebody else, I do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a sin not to do it. But every single time that happens, whether it's a week or a month or a year, a chain of almost impossible odds of events, just one after the other, will drop something into my lap that never would have been there, and nor could I have ever possibly predicted. Right? But the only thing I can do is trace it back to that event.
To the seeds of love that you planted.
Yep. I don't. Is that a thing?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that would show me that I don't actually have agency.
Mm-hmm.
That means like the best things for me are what is provided by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So how could absolute liberty be anything else but a curse?
Thank you.
It's
well
you.
Said.
If your political and moral ideology says the exact same things as the cover page of the Satanic Bible,
yep,
you have a problem. Do as thou wilt is the whole of the law. What does that sound like?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like absolute freedom.
Yes. I wonder who it is that created libertarianism. That's
right?
A whole other. We're not going to go there on this episode.
No,
just something to leave
for another thing.
Yeah, we'll leave people something to think about right there.
If you position yourself and you conceptualize your identity and your relationship to yourself, your kin, and the world as the opposition to Christ, you do not have to set out to do evil. Evil will be provided for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you don't have to do evil. All you have to do is just be opposed to good, and the evil will take care of itself.
Yep.
Right? And there is a certain group of people that believe that they have a special relationship with conscious entities that lack physical bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good thing, actually. Now, demonic possession is a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of those 70% of people without consciousness, let me lay something profound on you. Bodies without consciousness will be vehicles and vessels for consciousnesses without bodies.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't behind the wheel, someone else is going to be. Anybody that's had any experience with out-of-body experiences or consciousness projection or astral projection knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because there's a good chance when you leave your body, you will come back to find somebody else trying to get in.
Correct.
And I use the term somebody very loosely.
Right. Yeah. There's a parable in, I think it's John, discussing, cleaning the house, sweeping it of all of evil spirits and whatnot, and not filling it with something good. It comes back and there's many more times what you swept out. But
yes.
Yeah. I probably just messed that up badly, but
it's 100% the truth. People don't understand, they don't understand. There's a reason that in the Arab world, the Muslim world, they don't say the word, they have no word for cancer. It's not that they don't think cancer exists.
Okay.
They just happen to be a little bit smarter than us. As in, they remember what we forgot. When you say something out loud, you give it power. as in like your thoughts and ideas, when you say them out loud and they leave your mouth, they have a will of their own and they have some power, right? You are never so much as talking as you are casting spells. Right? What the Arabs know about is that talking about cancer, saying it out loud, gives it power. Right? And if you notice, the people that scream about things have a tendency of bringing that very thing that they're screaming about.
Mm.
Right? You scream about Nazis for long enough and you'll find them because you'll literally create them. Right? Like the amount of power that the average human being has over their spiritual existence would startle most people and would probably make most people live their lives very differently if they knew. Right? Like the spiritual plane of existence. Everyone thinks like the worst word ever is like the spirit world or like.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, tell me why you think so.
Because we're in it.
Yes. It's not a separate place.
Yes. Yeah.
We live in the same place.
Yes.
I don't know what the electromagnetic spectrum has to do with it. I don't think they're connected, but they do seem to hang out together. Like whenever you look at like consciousness from a scientific perspective, it's never far behind, right? Where you have one, you'll kind of end up seeing the other one in some capacity. And particularly when it comes to consciousnesses without bodies, particularly, at least this is where I'm going with it. And that's a startling thought because like your dog can smell 100 million times more than you can. 100 million. Right. So imagine if you had 100 million noses, what you could smell.
Yeah. My dog would smell worse.
Yeah. Like his whole world is different than yours.
Yeah. Poor
his
guy.
whole perception. Yeah. Dogs can smell cancer. Dogs can smell things that are hundreds of miles away.
Right.
Right. Like it's like their sense of smell is so profound that it's basically like a superpower, right? Like they can see through smells and they can see distances so far and they can see things so invisible, right? So their whole perception, what they're able to see and how they interact with their world is much deeper than yours in that sense. And everything that we see because of its electromagnetic frequency, right? Like the spectrum of light is just one end of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? A radio wave and a flashlight beam is no different, right? They're just different ends of a spectrum. And if you were to take that spectrum and you were to stretch it out the length of the Mississippi River, you know what distance the human's perceptive abilities is able to see? 13 inches.
Is it? Wow.
So you can't see 99.9 something percent of the electromagnetic spectrum is entirely invisible to you. But yet you libertarians, or really like a large percentage of the population of the United States and the Western world, you think that if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. And you can see 18 fucking inches
of
something the length of the Mississippi River. Like there's so much of our world that is literally just right outside of our perception. It doesn't make it any less real and any less dangerous. I mean, we see this shit with the fucking trans people.
Yeah.
Everybody should go look and find videos of the trans protests, right? See if you can find 5 or 6 trannies together, animated by some type of emotion. I urge everyone to do this. It'll scare the shit out of you. Right? Find 5 or 6 of these fucking people together, screaming or yelling or whatever, and turn the sound off and watch their faces.
Yep. I've done this.
Yeah?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you must have heard something else. Yeah. I try and urge as many people to do this as possible.
Yes.
Because what you will see is the same face.
It's a collective spirit.
Yes. They all make the same facial expressions at the same time.
Right.
So that is, nonverbal communication. If nonverbal communication was verbal communication, what you're witnessing is the same voice singing out of 5 different mouths at the same time. Imagine how startling that would be, how scary that would be. If all of a sudden, like you're in an elevator with 5 people and all of a sudden they open their mouths and the same voice comes out of all of them. You would be in spiritual turmoil. Like, and we instinctively know, like when we see these people, Buck, we know. We can't put our finger on it, but we feel something is profound. Like a guy dressed as a woman is never, I'm 6'8", and I'm a huge guy.
You're 6'8"?
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
I literally am built like the abominable snowman.
Okay. Careful, you're almost doxing yourself. That's a rare height, buddy.
Yeah. It is pretty rare. But there's absolutely no way in hell a man in a dress is ever going to pose any threat to me. That's never going to be dangerous. Like, there's never going to be a situation where I'm not going to be able to cave his face in,
right?
Probably with my bare hands.
Right.
But yet, when I come in contact with a 150-pound trans dude, like my blood runs cold. And I'm sure it's probably the same for most of us that are listening to this. Something is off about them that we can't put our finger on that scares us.
Yep.
It makes us uneasy. Why is that? I understand disgust. Disgust is one thing.
Yeah.
But you don't want that person near you. Why is that? It's not like mental illness.
Yeah. It's not like seeing a homeless person and you're like, ugh. Right.
Yeah, but so you're like, all right, these people are mentally ill. Do I think mental illness is contagious? Is it a cold? Why do I have an aversion, such a strong aversion to being even in proximity to that person?
Well, because it's a spiritual illness.
Yes. I don't want to be noticed. I don't want to catch the eye of whatever is in that person.
Right.
Right? Like
Medusa. Yeah.
Isn't that strange? Like, and nobody believes that mental illness is contagious. But yet when we encounter people with mental illness or what we think is mental illness, we suddenly get this chill up our spine. Like we need to get as far away as possible. Why is that? I've never had anyone be able to explain that to me in a way that I thought was, anyways. That's just something for people to think about. I know we've been going for a while.
It is, yeah. We're about to run out of time on my time card even. This is a first.
Good.
This will definitely be 2 parts. Because lengthwise, but also kind of topic-wise, we kind of split it evenly, beautifully. You did, I should say.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, I've spent like almost an hour talking about the financial stuff. His show is normally an hour. Fuck.
Yeah. Well, now we got 2 episodes out of this, which is good.
Yep.
Excuse me. I almost
Perfect.
coughed. My producer will cut that part. Okay. Stormy, what would you like to plug? You know,
I don't promote anything. I make
Good.
no money off of what
Okay.
I say.
just a Twitter
My
presence.
beliefs are on my own. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter if you want, whatever. If
Okay.
you don't have Twitter and you just like listen to me, then keep on listening to me. I do this, you know, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to, I don't need another profession.
Yeah, I think you're good. You're set there.
I am set.
All right, Stormy. Thank you very much, sir.
Everybody should give Buck money. If you're not a paid subscriber, then you're not going to be invited to the next Zoom call.
That's right.
Where, as you've heard from this podcast episode or the other episode, that apparently there was a lot of really, really interesting shit happening
Yes.
that you did not get to witness. So give Buck money.
There you go. Thank you.
Hey man, we need just to actually like support our content creators. Like the media is dying. All right.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I have a feeling this will trigger more reactions even than the one with Stormy last week. One thing he will not leave you feeling is apathy. And I love chatting with Stormy. Again, thanks for being here, buddy. And as for next week, we have a new guest on the show. It is going to be a very orthodox heavy episode, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear this discussion with her. There's your only hint. There is your only hint. And until then, you guys have a good one.
You get split in half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow Podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.